In this video review, I'm going to tell you about Café. This is a game that I picked up at my friendly local game store a couple of weeks ago before we went on a trip to Italy. When we go on vacation, I like to bring smaller games with me and games that seem to be easy so I can play with my family. I can play with my wife, who is not a hardcore gamer. Also, my wife is from Brazil, so I thought that this game would appeal to her also thematically because it is about producing, roasting, and shipping coffee from Brazil to different places around the world. And that little scam worked, a little trick worked because we were able to play with her. So I played it only with non-hardcore gamers, although my kids, who are now 10 and 11, will probably be hardcore soon enough. So I played the game with 3 and 4 players, and that seems to be an ideal number of players. So again, we're gonna build an engine and we're gonna build a tableau. Instead of playing this with my wife, we discovered that she finds the word tableau offensive. Yeah, I don't get it either. She doesn't like the word tableau. So we made sure to just use it as often as we possibly could. Because we love her, we want to keep, having that friendly banter there. Each player will start with a starting card representing the starting actions and resources in their production area, and later they will add more cards to expand their tableau. Each player also has a card such as this one that they will use as their warehouse. There are 4 kinds of coffee: yellow, brown, green, and red. And I wonder that's going to be a problem for colorblind or color impaired players because there's no other way of distinguishing these cubes other than that way by color. And then there's a display here indicating the number of actions that a player has. Each player starts with 1 action, and later the number of actions that you have is equal to the number of coffee cup symbols visible on your tableau. And so if later my tableau has more actions because I'm adding more cups to my tableau, then I will simply use this cube to mark how many actions I have available, and then I can also move it down as I take my actions as a reminder there. So each turn basically has 2 phases, one in which you are gonna add a card to your tableau, and one in which everybody uses their actions, the actions indicated by their tableau, and also the number of actions indicated by the number of cups that are visible. And this second phase, when players are activating the actions to their tableau, that can be taken simultaneously by all players. There will be 3 cards available from a deck, and these are cards that will come out of that deck. And each player will have 3 to choose from. So once a player takes one, it is immediately replaced so that the other players also have 3. So each player will get a new card, they will add it to their tableau, and again, and then you activate those actions. That's the general flow of the game. The cards. If the card that you're taking does not have a coffee cup symbol on it, you do not have to pay anything for it. If it has a coffee cup, which will give you an extra action, you have to pay with a coffee cube from your warehouse, and that is returned to the general supply. When you add a new card to your tableau, it must cover 2, 3, or 4 previous symbols that were on previous cards. And my kids didn't like that too much at the beginning, and because, loss aversion, it can feel a bit heavy. So that would be a legal placement, even that could be a legal placement, although I just lost a coffee cup. And then later, of course, more options emerge as when you cover a symbol. Symbols, they may come from different cards. So, for example, that would be a legal placement and covering a symbol from each card. Now, if, as I said, if you're taking a card that has a coffee cup that gives an extra action and you have to pay for it, unless there already are 2 symbols of this kind in your tableau, in which case you can add a coffee cup symbol, a card with a coffee cup symbol without paying. without paying the cost. And suppose that, I don't know, after a couple of turns, my tableau kind of looks like that. I have 3 actions now, and so on and so forth. So it gets to a point where you are going to be, where you're going to use your actions in the second phase of a turn. The actions are indicated by letters. You have A, B, and C, and D there. So the actions are, and it's kind of like, it's very easy to remember thematically. You just need to remember the first you need to collect the coffee, then you dry, then you roast it, then you ship it. And those 4 actions that make sense logically and sequentially are, again, A, B, C, and D respectively. For an action, and remember, you can use your cube there to mark that you're spending actions. For an action, I can activate a coffee production space or a group of orthogonal adjacent coffee production spaces, and I place a corresponding coffee cube on each of them, like so. For an action, I can activate a drying space or a number of adjacent drying spaces, like that, and place any and all cubes of a kind on a drying space. So that for an action, I could do all that you just saw. You cannot put different kinds of coffees in the same kind of drying space because, well, that's just weird. That's just like you're gonna mix the coffees. Who's gonna... That's a mess, okay? It's a mess. Don't do it. For an action, I can activate a roasting space or a group of orthogonal adjacent roasting spaces and transfer their dry coffee, again, 1 kind per roasting space. So for an action, I can do what you just saw. Or for an action, I can ship coffee. Remember, produce, dry, roast, and then ship it. When I ship it, I can ship it to my warehouse, in which case it simply goes in the corresponding section. And you basically want to make lines like this because it's very important that you know how many you have of each kind of coffee for purposes that we will see. Or again, from roasting spaces, you can send them, again, you can send them to your warehouse and or to coffee houses that require that. Coffee house spaces may be 1 square large or 2 squares, and they simply have an indication of what they want and how much they want of it. So for one action, again, for one action, you can ship any and all cubes from your roasting spaces, and I decide, for example, to place that one there. These are the ones in my warehouse because right now I don't have any coffee houses looking for brown cube. But suppose that I had this in my roasting space, then I could, for an action, send them there, and these are the ones to my warehouse. So that's simply the chain of events, which is, again, pretty simple. And also, as you can see, pretty strict, pretty rigid. Produce coffee, dry it, roast it, send it to different places. And suppose that at the end of the game, this is my situation here, and you'll see why that matters soon. So the game will last 8 turns, and you don't need to keep track because the deck of cards will be exhausted at the end of the 8th turn, because you will use a different amount of cards depending on number of players. So at the end of the game, players will score points for the coffee houses that they fully supplied, and the number of points is indicated there. So I fully supplied that coffee house, and that gives me 5 victory points. That one gives me 2 victory points. Then I will also score points for cubes in my warehouse. Now, the kind of coffee that I have the least of, in this case, that would be 1. That gives me, that coffees were 2 victory points per cube. So that one would be 2 victory points. Then I look at the coffee which had the second fewest, that would be red in this case, and that kind of coffee is worth 1 point per cube. It's a system in which you're going to score the two of which are the fewest, so it gives you an incentive to diversify as much as possible. If this is the situation, my warehouse, that will be worth 4 victory points. The fewest have 2 off, 2 points each, and second fewest, still that one, 1 point per cube, so there's still 3 victory points. So you total victory points from the two kinds of coffees in your warehouse for which are the fewest, plus your supplied coffee houses, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. I should probably mention that the game also comes with an expansion called Espresso, which I haven't played, I will never play, and I will never endorse in any way, form, or shape, because they spelled espresso with an X, and that's just not acceptable. So in essence, this is how you play Café. Café is a fun game and we all enjoy playing it. I think I would enjoy it more if chance didn't have it, that they played similar games, or at least games that do similar things, and they just seem to do those things more efficiently, more smoothly. I just think I would enjoy it more if it didn't happen, this game, to have comparisons that just work a little bit better. When it comes to building a tableau, I recently played Veggies, and I reviewed that also, which does that more smoothly in a simpler, more intuitive way. It's all about building that tableau. And when it comes to building an engine of resources, get this, change into that, turn into that, and then into something that gives you points, I play Furnace, which again has more flexibility and more options for similar gameplay, similar complexity. So compared to those, this game turns out to be a little more rigid, and just require more steps for a similar effect. So if I had to choose between Café and Furnace, I would always play Furnace. And well, unless I'm traveling and only have Café with me, I guess this is the fact, this is more portable. Unless I'm traveling and only have Café, I'll play Furnace instead. So, but suppose that you really like games about coffee and not games about furnaces or vegetables, then booyah. How about Café on its own merits? And its own merits, it's again perfectly valid, perfectly fine game. It has an interesting puzzle element in the fact that your tableau, every time you expand it, you have to give up something that you had before. And yes, in recent game design and recent game culture, we don't like loss aversion too much, but it's not tragic, and it's not like, well, I'm losing my stuff because you actively destroyed it and somebody else is increasing their production without losing anything. It's a fact of life. Everybody has to cover some of their previous icons as the game progresses. So first, it feels equal, it feels fair, and that's important. And secondly, that's a little challenge there because, well, I like to have everything, but I can't. However, right now, my emphasis is on growing and drying, and so I guess I can cover a couple of roasting icons while I'm doing that. Later, when I have a lot of stuff that is drying, I can maybe add some roasting, covering some production, and so I'm working on that element, on that part of the loop, and later in the game, you'll be able to do all of those 4 things. And it really gets to creating that engine. Early on, you're sacrificing some things to create some other icons. Later on, you're able to exploit pretty much all 4 actions if you so desire, but that is also when you should switch to delivering more. So there are some really interesting elements in the tableau building, which I haven't seen necessarily in other tableau building games, or at least I can think of other games that do that right now. So that part is fun. That part is perfectly legit, and it's interesting to figure out what to cover, what to give emphasis to in different parts of the game. I do feel that there's quite a bit of randomness when it comes to the cards that are available, because when my turn comes around, there's a coffee shop that is gonna pay a lot, and I happen to have those cubes on the way in my loop. That can make a significant difference. Or again, I really need to roast something and the roasting icons are not available there. Of course, randomness can be influenced by the fact that the other players realize that and they're going to remove those cards from the offer, which may or may not be the case, but it's a possibility. So for a game that has a pretty tight economy of actions, you only have 8 turns. And again, for those cubes to make it into a warehouse, they have to go through those steps exactly. Something may go wrong. And if something goes wrong because you made a mistake or because randomness doesn't give you the right icons or not enough of those icons, it can feel a bit harsh. It can feel a bit punishing. I wish that a game that has such a tight economy gave you some way, some leeway here and there, maybe 1 or 2 tokens as a one-time ability, you discard it, and you're able to quote-unquote cheat, like to skip a step, or to use someone else's icons. Okay, I'm giving you this token, and I'm acting as if I was using 3 or drawing spaces because I'm using one of yours. I wish there was some way of giving you more flexibility there, because it may happen that at the end of the game you're like one action short from completing a loop, from doing something, from delivering goods to a coffee shop, and you feel that, well, I took 3 actions, I produced and I dried and I roasted, and I'm 1 action short, so those actions really don't give me anything. They didn't result in anything. And you probably know me. My philosophy is I don't mind if I lose or I win. I prefer to win though. But I like a game that gives me agency and in which everything I do is meaningful. And it may be that at the end of the last round, 3 of your 5, 6, 7 actions, 3 of those actions are useless because you almost delivered to a copy shop, you almost delivered to the warehouse, but you don't. So there is that. There are a couple of little things there that I think could be fixed by figuring out ways of making the sequence of action less rigid. And you really, those 4 actions, it's all or nothing. If you don't complete the sequence, there's nothing there for you. So, that's my assessment of Café. It's an okay game. We enjoy playing it. There are better options out there, but if you don't have access to those, or if you love the theme so much, this is a perfectly valid game. It's an okay game, it's not a great one. So that's it. It's a game that I don't mind playing, especially if better alternatives are not available. But again, it's not bad, it's not great either. And this is my assessment of Café.